Thanks for joining us tonight for season 2 of Let's Talk Biblically. Please like this video and share this video. Please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed before, please subscribe tonight to this particular channel. And if you've got questions or comments, we'll have a number for you below that you can call in tonight. We'll have free open lines. We got them now. Also, keep in mind that you can actually, if you have questions, you can text them in. You can put them in YouTube and let us know, and we'll see what we can do to answer them. And remember, we're on Apple Podcasts as well as on Spotify and Google Podcasts. So please follow and subscribe to us on these particular platforms. Well, tonight we've got a great topic, and tonight's topic will be dealing with atheism and agnosticism. You know, we are actually 2 weeks away from the beginning of school. And what's wild about it is they say anywhere, and by the way, we got open phone lines. Let me jump on that and tell you right now. If you want to call in, you can call in at any time. You can call in several times tonight. Please do. We've got, they say anywhere from 66 to 70% of our children who go off to school as believers come back as unbelievers. I mean, this is like crazy. And what happens is that most people come back and they say, most kids come back from college and they say to their parents, well, what about this and what about that? And most parents aren't able to respond. And I've noticed in many cases, some parents, just make the comment, well, they just need to believe in Jesus, And lots of times that's just a lazy way of not obeying 2 Timothy 2:15, where we're told to study to show ourselves approved unto God, a workman need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. It's a lazy way in the sense that we're not being the Acts 17:11 Bereans, where we're searching the scriptures to see if these things are so. So remember, we're told in 1 Peter 3:15 to be ready to give an answer to every man for the hope that lies within us with gentleness and meekness or respect. So tonight we're going to look at some ways to deal with this. I mean, when you run into people like Bill Nye, the science guy, okay? Some of you grew up on him because he used to be on Saturday morning on TV, who's an avid atheist who denies God to the bone, okay? Some of you are familiar with Neil Degrasse. Neil Degrasse is probably the most popular black atheist out there. And he's on the talk shows and stuff. The good thing about that dude is, at least recently, he has claimed to say that he is not sure if there's a God. So he's almost moved from an atheist position to an agnostic position. So hopefully God is working with him. And people like, just ordinary folks like Chris Rock, who says, Christianity is for chumps and fools and the rest of this stuff. We need to be ready and able to give an answer. Now, some of you got a way of dealing with atheists. Please call us tonight and let us know how you deal with them. But I'm going to look at a whole bunch of points, and you can just chat in. Amen. And one of the biggest issues that our children are going to face, and it may not just be our children, but many of us are going back to work and we're coming in contact with people again. And one of the big issues that we're going to deal with is evolution. Okay. And that's one of the things that they point out. Now, evolution is just the belief that we have migrated from one form of life, one form of being, in so many words, to another. And so we know, for one, clearly Scripture says in Psalm 14, verse 1 and Psalm 53, verse 1, that the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. So if somebody's an atheist, they are a fool. As I shared before, their birthday is on April the 1st, okay? So they're clearly a fool, all right? And God has said in Romans 1:21 that if a person does not retain God in their knowledge, it says, for when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, and because of that, and became unthankful. Because of that, God gave them over to a reprobate mind. And on 4 occasions, God says he gave them over. He gave them over. He gave them over. And some of the stuff that he gave them over to, I think in lots of cases, is evolution. And a belief in foolishness, like Mother Nature. You hear them walking around talking about, thank goodness, knock on wood, all the rest of the stuff. Father Time, the football gods, all the rest of the stuff that people have been given over to because they didn't want to retain God in their knowledge. And one of them is evolution, I believe. So, and let me just say this. Evolution really is the teaching that we were once a one-cell enigma um, inside the water, just because the ocean and the world was full of water, and we were just inside that water as just a one-cell item. And they believe after a while we begin to grow fins, and then, and even though I don't have any fins on me, and then as time went on, maybe you got it on you, and as time went on, we began to be able to migrate to have legs. And before you know it, we got legs, and we crawled up out of the water. And then before you know it, we were on the land crawling. And then before you know it, we were really, before you know it, we were a monkey. And then after we were a monkey, before you know it, we were the monkey's uncle. We were humans. This is what they teach. You know what I mean? And what's sad about it, and I think we should take care of our animals, by the way. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 10 says that a godly man will take care of his animals. But what's funny about it is I just want to say this as a side note. The cartoons, because I'm a cartoon person. I'm going to confess it tonight. Someone would call in and agree with me that you're a cartoon person. And I'm an old school cartoon person. Back in the day, they started bringing out Bugs Bunny. They started bringing out Daffy Duck, Porky the Pig. They were all animals. And before you know it, guess what? As humans, we started changing our beliefs and our thoughts about animals. Before you know it, animals, because the thought of evolution and all the rest of this, people start changing their thoughts. Before you know it, people our kids are watching a sponge underwater who's a homosexual and getting info about life from him as he calls out to, on a consistent basis on that show, he calls out to one of his gods, by the way. People don't even realize it, or children don't even realize it. But they'll show animals shaking and animals crying on TV and give money to this and to that. That's why it's important. And part of it has to do with evolution. That's why it's important to know your word. We're told in Psalm 119:99 that if you study God's word, you'll be wiser than your enemies, and you will be wiser than even your instructors. And especially for you young people here today who are in school, and for you parents to be able to teach your children. Now, let me just say, or your grandchildren, to claim there is no God means that you have been to every planet in the entire universe, not just this universe. They say that there are over 2 trillion universes. So if you claim to be God, that means that you've been to every planet to show, hey, I've been there. There is nobody there. There is no God. So we know that's not the case. And by the way, when you listen to people say, oh yeah, well, I believe in the Big Bang, it's quite obvious to ask them, where did the Big Bang come from? Who started or created the Big Bang? And none of them have an answer to it. None of them. In fact, it is impossible. Let me think. Just think about this. It is impossible to get something out of nothing. And I mean where you begin with nothing and you produce something. Now in the Bible, we're told about how, it starts with God, and then God does produce what's known as, or God does do ex nihilo, which just means he's able to create something out of nothing. But it started with God. With evolution, it's just nothing produces something. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing produces nothing produces the Big Bang. All of a sudden it's here. It just doesn't make sense. I've heard people say, use quantum physics. Okay, and I'm not a physicist or anything like that, but I do know a little bit about it. And you know what they'll say? They say, well, quantum physics teaches that these, because the word quantum just means small. These small molecules, can create something if you just allow them to do it. Well, no one has ever seen this. This is something someone made up. Listen, it takes more faith to believe in evolution. And this is a scientific fact. If you just look at the fact, it takes more faith to believe in evolution than to believe in Santa Claus, to believe in the Bunny Man, to believe in all these things. The first, what's that one that puts the money under the pillow? The twofer. You know what I'm saying? You might as well believe in that. Listen, evolution is grown up fairy tales. That's all it is. It is grown up fairy tales. All right, to believe that all this has happened by accident. It reminds me, and by the way, we have an open line, so you can call in, that it reminds me, I'm getting worked up. It reminds me of the black Muslims. How many ever, just driving your car and you look around and there they are, on the corner. Want the final call, and they got the suits on. I say most of them, they do looking sharp. But they come up to a nice haircut, whatever. They come up, want to learn about the brother of Muhammad and the rest of the stuff. So they come up to the window. And what's so funny about it is that when this happens, as I always ask them something, I say, let me ask you, is it true that you believe that the white man was created in a lab by mistake by Yaqub, a doctor, a scientist? Every single one of them says yes. Yes, without a doubt. There's no doubt the white man was created by accident in a lab. Listen, you'd be better off believing that than you would evolution. Okay, that's just how bad the thought is. Now, the Big Bang Theory is just the belief that at some point, okay, the universe was really nothing. And all of a sudden, the molecules got together, which, where did they come from? You know what I mean? The atoms and all that came together, and there was an atomic explosion, a Big Bang, okay? And it created all of this. Really? I mean, really? Also, let me just say this. It is so evident that the universe, at some point or another, was wound up. If you just type it in your phone, just look up universe dying. Everyone agrees with the universe dying. Even the evolutionists will say the universe is dying. That means at some point or another, the universe had to have a start. So the universe is not eternal. It had to be started up at some point, and someone got it going. And we know this from the first and second laws of thermodynamics and heat loss. We know at some point or another it had a starting point. Not only that, but someone outside of time, space, and matter must have done this. Someone and you know who says that he's outside of time, space, and matter? In Exodus 3:14. Remember where God told Moses to tell him his name was? Tell him that I am has sent you. You know the word I am there literally means the self-existing one or the eternal one. That's what it means. And so, for anyone to say that, well, it just came out of nowhere. And let me just say this too. Something stronger than the universe must have pushed it to get it started. That makes all the sense in the world, meaning that whatever or whoever we know was God created this had to be stronger than whatever it was, the stronger than the universe, which is made up of at least 10 billion galaxies, to get it going. He had to be wiser than what he created, because everything that creates something is wiser than what they created at some point. Now, someone say, well, look at computers. They get wiser than man. But at one point, man was wiser than the computers in order to build them. Are y'all with me on this? And so, it had to be wise. He had to be wiser than what he created. So something did. Not only that, just to think about the earth. Y'all live on an amazing planet. Do you know, listen, that we are 9.3 million miles away from the sun. If we were any closer, we'd burn up. If we were any further away, we'd freeze to death. Do you know that? Is that an accident? That's not an accident. The earth is tilted at 23 and a third degree angle. If we were tilted any more, we'd all fall off the earth. You know what I'm saying? So is that an accident? No planet in all the universe has 78% nitrogen in the atmosphere and 21% oxygen. No other planet has it. None. In all the universes that we know of. We're the only planet that has 71% water. Think about this. If we had more water, we'd probably drown. This is why, listen, they go this is why they want to go to Mars. This is why they want to go to Venus. You know why they want to go to these places? The first thing they do when they get there is they start digging. They're looking for water. They say, well, water's there must be life. Because they're looking somehow or another to deny God. It just reminds me of the Russian cosmonaut. Remember the Russians got into space first before we did. And what's funny about it is that the dude, Groshenev or whatever his name was, when he got up there, and I guess it was in the 60s, he said, see, there is no God. I went out there is no God. And what was funny about it, I think it was Billy Graham's wife said, yeah, there is no God, huh? If you want to meet God while you're out there in space, take your helmet off and you'll meet him very quickly. You know what I'm saying? Take your helmet off. And let me just say this too. This place had to have a designer. It's almost like I've shared before. If you go to if you we get a picture of Pluto, and there, Pluto is it's an ice planet. There's nothing there, but all of a sudden there was a picture. There was something they saw, and they said, "What is it that we saw on Pluto?" And they examined it, and guess what? It was a huge super Walmart. Wouldn't you say, "Hey, how'd that get there? Who put that there?" Wouldn't you say that? Wouldn't that make sense? You know what I'm saying? Would you just say, "Oh, all the molecules in in the universe got together, and they all of a sudden got in one spot, and they made the bricks for the Walmart, put the sign up"? That you wouldn't say that. It's funny. At first, they said the Earth was 2 million years old. Then they said, "Oh well, the Earth or they said the Earth and the universe they claim is eternal, but even though it's a heat loss, they say, oh, the Earth's 2 million years old. Then they said it's 4 million. Then they said it's 20 million. Then finally they said it's 4.3 billion years old. They keep changing it. You know why? They're making it up. They're making it up as they go. Come on, they're making it up as they go. It reminds me of Hebrews chapter 6, verse 12, where it says that our God is unchangeable. He's immutable. Listen, if we had been here if we've been here on this earth, they claim humans have been here for 4.3 billion years. Or actually, the earth has been here that long. First, there were dinosaurs and so forth. But if people have been around and dinosaurs are around all this time, all these billions of years, where is all the fossil fuel? You know what I'm saying? They say the fossil fuels come from dead animals. Where is all the fossil fuel? You know what's funny about it? If that was the case, we would walk out front and we'd be like on years ago. I remember they had the Beverly Hillbillies and they stumbled on oil. We would stumble on oil out front if there were so many fossil fuels around, because this shows that it's impossible. Not only that, but look at the source. Darwin and Huxley, his assistant, in the 1800s. Remember, Darwin grew up. His mama, at least, believed in Jesus a little bit. We're not sure if she was saved. She was a Unitarian. She would take him to church, but she died early. But his dad was an unbeliever. And Darwin, his sisters took him to church to learn about the things of God. But eventually, he rejected it. Most believe. And this guy went on, we know, to be a racist. Darwin believed that black people were in between the evolutionary stage, and we had not made it to the evolutionary stage of white people, so we were still animals. In fact, he was a part of that whole belief that the human head determined the intelligence of a human. So they would measure black people's heads, and they would say, well, they're actually not as big as white people's, even though it would have been interesting if they would have measured the Aborigines' heads, which are mainly bigger than most people's heads. But they didn't do that. They measured the black. Oh, they're smaller. So guess what? They're not as intelligent. This guy was a racist. Not only that, think about this. The human DNA is amazing. Okay? In 1953, that's when they discovered DNA. I mean, that's just like, not too long ago. Okay? Do you know that they say that there's more DNA or more information in one drop of DNA? There's more information they can get out of that than the 17 million books at the Library of Congress. They can get so much information out of DNA. I mean, just different levels of information. In fact, if they took our DNA out of our body and stretched it, okay, because they took your DNA out of your body, from your blood and all that, where your DNA is at, and they stretched it. They can stretch it from Earth to the sun 600 times and back. That's how much information is in our DNA. And you tell me this is an accident? I've shared before, they could take the human body, cut it open, they say. Take out all the veins. By the way, the average vein size in your body is, your hair on your head. It is 3 times as small as a grain of hair or a strand of hair on your head. If they took that out and stretched it all out, they say at least that it would equal, which is amazing to me, it would equal, I think it's 100,000 miles if they did that with your veins. How about the human eye? Even Darwin, who came up with pretty much with the original theory of evolution, he even said the body has evolved, but the eye is different. I cannot attribute that to evolution. He says it's just too amazing. He didn't understand it. Even today, we're learning stuff about how the human eye relates to the brain. The human eye blinks 20,000 times a day. It blinks 4.2 million times a year. It is truly amazing. The heart beats 100,000 times a day, 2.5 billion times in a lifetime up until the age of 70. Someone designed this. How about the human hand? Me and my wife were one time just, examining this because we had learned this, that a man's ring finger, in most cases, I ain't gonna say all, but in almost all cases, as if you can look at my hand now, is taller than his index finger. So his ring finger, you see where my ring is taller than his index finger. On all men almost. Now, a woman's index finger is taller than her ring finger, which is interesting. Okay? I mean, you tell me there's not a God who made us different like this? How about the smartest animal to be around? They say that the smartest animal actually is not a chimpanzee. Many believe it's a dolphin. And what's interesting about it is that they say, well, the reason that we came from monkeys is look at our DNA and look at theirs. They say our DNA is like theirs, it's 90%. What was interesting is that, have you ever noticed that when they do tests like with HIV and even with the COVID virus, they use two animals. They use monkeys and they use mice, okay? And they fail, and most evolutionists fail to tell you that our DNA is 90%, they say, like a monkey, and they say that our DNA is 84% like a mouse. And that's something. And listen, and it's actually, I forgot the percentage of a dog. I think it's like, no, it's 84% like a dog, 90% like a mouse, 94% like or 98% like a monkey, and 65% like a chicken. So if you put all that together, that means that first we were chicken, and then we were a dog, and then we were a mouse, and then all of a sudden we were a monkey, and then we were a human. Does this make sense? I'm almost done. We got free lines. Some of you have asked some questions. Maybe I'll answer them. Look, not only that, where are all the transitional forms? Where's the half monkey, half human? This is why they're looking for Bigfoot. You know that. So they can say, look, there he is. He's half human, half monkey. Where are they at? You know where the transitional forms are? They're made up. Mermaids, Aquaman. You know what I'm saying? This stuff's untrue. It's all untrue. They have no real transitional forms. And in fact, even Darwin said, we have no transitional forms. We don't have it. They found pigs and turned them into dinosaurs. They found, or into humans and said, well, this is a human, but then found out it wasn't. All these particular things. Where are the half human, half? And in fact, why aren't we still evolving? All of a sudden we stop. They said, well, it takes a long time. Where is it going on at? Not only that, I always ask people this much. In scientific theory, where's observation? We got a new caller coming in. We're going to take this. So please tell us your name tonight and your question as well, please. Hello, please tell us your name as well as your question, if you can hear us. Sounds like they're having a little difficulty. We're having difficulty here. We'll get them on.
Hello?
Not getting a sound?
Hello?
All right, so please come on. Call back, please, as God puts it upon your heart. But, just how about just basic old scientific observation? All right. What's funny about it is that in our scientific theory of that we have as we were taught when we were little, we had, you had to come up with a hypothesis and you had to come up with an experiment, and then you had to have observation. There is no observation of evolution. There is none. This is made up. It's all made up. In fact, this is what they call evolution, and most people don't realize it. They call it a scientific theory. It's just a theory. It's an hypothesis. It's not a conclusion of a situation. It's something they've made up. And by the way, where did good and evil come from? Where did good and evil come from? Are you on there at this time? Caller, can you hear us? Because we can't hear you. So please speak. Okay. Just having issues. Where did good and evil come from? We know from Romans chapter 2 that God gave us the ability to know good and evil as human beings. So, ask an evolutionist, where did morality come from? Not only that, this is what's so funny and amazing. Where did the 7-day week come from? Evolutionists have no answer at all for that. Because the 7-day week has been around from all of history. And they have no way of explaining. We know where it came from, Genesis chapter 1 and 2. We know this. And by the way, where did all the dinosaurs go? You know what evolution teaches? In most cases, most evolution teaches that the dinosaurs were wiped out by a great big asteroid. A great big piece of ice or whatever out of the sky, or rock, and hit the planet, killed off all the dinosaurs. I mean, this is like a fairy tale. You know what I mean? The Bible speaks about dinosaurs. But they say, oh, dinosaurs were here and then they were gone, then we were here. Come on. Now, we prove that there is a God. So this is how you do that. Now, moving forward, we'll go a few more minutes. Which God is it? Is it the God? So let's say you spoke with someone and you shown them all these things. And then they say, okay, well, there is a God. Or maybe there's a God. Then they're going to say, which one is it? Is it the God of Islam? Which was pretty much, given to us by Muhammad. Okay. And by the way, Islam means submission. Okay. And a Muslim just means one who submits. And you know why it's like that? Because that's the way they roll, bro. This is why you got a sword. You have within their emblems, you have a sword, because this is how they work. Remember that Muhammad said that blacks were raisin heads. In fact, he had slaves who were black. We forget this about Muhammad. We forget that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old named Aisha, okay? People have lost their life for saying this because they've told the truth that this is what this guy was doing. He said he had the sexual power of 20 men. This guy said, you know what? Make no friends with Christians or Jews. We know this from Surah chapter 5, verse 51 in the Quran. We know he said, cut off the feet and the hands of all infidels. This is why they cut off the head and the feet and the hands of people in Africa. Muslims do that because they're trying to obey Muhammad. This is why, when that crazy guy, bin Laden, was doing what he was doing, he was just doing what the Quran told him to do. And people didn't like it. And so not only that, we know from Sarah, verse 3 through 5, it's interesting that Muhammad said, you are to follow the people of the book and you are to follow the gospels and obey what they say. But see, Muslims don't mention that. In fact, we got to remember that Muhammad thought he was demon possessed when he was getting his revelations. How about Buddha? I've shared before how Buddha left his wife looking for happiness in life. How about Hinduism, which teaches reincarnation? And so what they teach in so many words is the way you lived in this life will dictate what you will be in the next life. So, they teach that, if you didn't live right, you'll come back as an ant or whatever. They've got cows in Calcutta and the rest of these places, I think it's Calcutta, these other places in India, where people are starving to death and they got cows walking around because it's Uncle Billy. They got rats eating the rice because they think the rats are on salad. Really? So what if you decide to become a Christian? You begin to look at the Christian beliefs. So let's say you get a person to that point and say, okay, well, maybe I'll look into this Christian thing. Well, maybe they'll say, well, maybe I'll be a Mormon. No. Because remember, the Mormons taught that, at one point the Mormons taught that blacks could not be allowed into the priesthood. Where I live at, we've got the Mormon temple. Blacks were not allowed to go into the Mormon temple up until I think it was 1976. First black guy goes to the Mormon temple. because they began to all of a sudden get revelation from God that it's okay because everyone was accepting blacks at that time. Remember, they believe that Jesus is the spirit brother of Lucifer. Remember, they believe that God dwells on the planet Kolob, and there he has sex with his many wives, and he produces these pre-spirits that are born unto us in this earth. This is the foolishness they believe. Joseph Smith, who founded the Mormon church, actually claimed that there was a place called the land of Moroni, and that there was these specific gold tablets which no one has seen that he saw, and the rest of this stuff. And in fact, this guy was involved in committing polygamy. This is why he was killed to death in Illinois, for committing polygamy. In fact, in the book of Mormon, in chapter 12, verse 1, in the book of Ether, it says that there's a guy who gets his head chopped off. After he gets his head chopped off, he gets up and kills somebody. I mean, come on. Anyway, what if you want to be a Jehovah's Witness? Don't do it. Don't do it. I know we've moved from atheism to, because once you get an atheist to a point where he admits that there's a God, then he's going to start searching for which God it is. I think the first thing, someone asked the question, what are some of the first things that you should probably say to an atheist? Is to ask him, does he believe that there's a God? And when he says, no, well, I don't believe there's a God, okay? Really, the proof is upon him. But one of the things is you come at him with the thought of design. All the stuff I just mentioned, okay? And that's that the universe, the planet we live on, the earth is tilted at a certain angle. We have a certain amount of oxygen. Why are we the only ones, okay? Where did all this come from, okay? And if he says, I don't know, or if he says, well, the Big Bang, as I said before, where did the Big Bang come from? Every effect has a causer. It has someone who caused it. And whoever caused it had to be the stronger or more, as well as in most cases, more intelligent than what he caused or created. And in all cases regarding the universe, he must be eternal. And so when it comes to dealing with a Jehovah's Witness, and maybe we'll do a podcast on them as well, because they're going to be coming out because the weather getting better or whatever. They know you in the house, whatever. But the Jehovah's Witnesses, don't do it. 1976 said Jesus was coming back. They give them over 20 times said Jesus come back. They said Jesus came back in 1914 spiritually. Do you believe that? And so then we get to the Bible. And once we get to the Bible, all right, and a regular Christian studying what God's word has to say, you begin to truly realize that there is a God. And not only that there's a God, but then you begin to focus on who that God wants us to call upon. And he's trying to relate to us and speak to us. And as soon as you open the Bible, you'll realize that it's the most read book of all time. It's the most stolen book of all time, by the way, as well as the most sold book of all time. If you just read, if you can get by Genesis 1:1, you can clearly believe that there's a God, and you can clearly believe that God sent Jesus. Miracles are not a problem if you can believe Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Notice here what you get. You get time. In the beginning, God, in the beginning, okay, that's time. Time is made up of three parts, right? Just like the Trinity, right? Past, future, present. And then you get in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Heavens refer to space, okay, which is height, depth, width, okay? You get three parts of that, just like the Trinity. And then guess what else you get? You get time, space, and matter. Matter is made up of solid, liquid, gas. Remember that? Remember, solid is made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. If you put all that together, it's like a great big trinity. You know what I mean? And by the way, you cannot have space without time. You cannot have time without matter. They all go together. So you can't, create something and then have it here without having time. This is why God said in the beginning. So it has to be that way. And God did it. And not only that, let me just say this when it comes to dealing with someone who says, well, the earth is, 20 billion years old or whatever, okay? The earth in itself, it might be 20 trillion years old. But we know it's only been here, I believe, for anywhere from 6,000 to 7,000 years. And the reason I say this is because everything that God built had a built-in age with it when he made it. When he made the trees, they were full grown. When he made Adam, which I think it was 30, just like Jesus when he went into the ministry, I believe that these things were full grown. He created Eve full grown. So keep these things in mind when you have to, deal with someone who is an atheist. Let me just go on maybe point out 3 other points here real quick, or 4 more. First of all, as well, we know that life started in the Middle East. Now, what's interesting about it is that most evolutionists will say that humans they'll say, oh, yeah, they evolved and they came out of the water somewhere in the Middle East. Okay? Because these are where we find, Peking Lucy and the rest of these things they say, which are old things that they found. It's all in the Middle East. So the Bible says, guess what? That life started in the Middle East. We know this from, if you read Genesis chapter 2, where we had the Nile, you had the Euphrates, you had the Pison River, and so forth, the Guyana. You had these things which are right there in the Middle East. Not only that, okay, we know that it says in Genesis 1:24 that God created things after its kind. They have tried to clone things and have not been able to do it. They've been able to clone within what we would call macro, what's known as macro evolution. That means that within its species, you're able to do things like you can get a half Shih Tzu, like my dogs are 100% Shih Tzu, but let's say you get a Shih Tzu and a Labrador mix. You can do that within that. Because remember, in the beginning, God created dogs, male and female. And, I don't know if one was one type or one's the other, and they mixed, and before you know it, they had all these different types of dogs, okay? So you can take a cantaloupe, and you can turn it into a regular cantaloupe, into a Western cantaloupe, a bigger one. You know what I mean? You can do these things through some form of cloning and so forth. But they've tried to make a fish a human. They tried to make a dog a cat. They can't do it. They can't cross species because God made everything after its kind. And by the way, all DNA traces back to one man. Did you know that? Evolutionists will admit it and they will say it. They agree. And you can point that out. Why is it that all DNA goes back to one person? And doesn't the Bible point out in the beginning God created, and then what he created was, as he said in Genesis 1:26 and 27, let us make man in our image and our likeness. He created male and female, all this stuff. It goes back to Adam. And then from Adam came Eve. Not only that, biblical evidence just in the Bible from Isaiah 40 verse 22, where it says that the earth is a sphere, it is round. They believe that the earth at one point was flat. Not really, even though others denied it, but we know not until 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue that people really embraced the fact that the earth was round. We know, listen, that the earth hangs, Job 38:7, where it says that the earth, or Job 26:7, it's one or two, hangs on nothing. They believe that the earth was held up by Atlas, okay? God says this. We know that the life of the flesh, Leviticus 17:11, runs in the blood. They didn't realize this, I'm telling you, until the 1800s. This is how George Washington died, because they bloodlet him, because they didn't realize that life was in the blood. How about the stars? We know from Jeremiah 33:22 that the stars are innumerable. They believed at one time that there was, maybe 100,000, maybe, 5 million. Galileo came along, and they looked at the stars, and they were like, wow. When he created the telescope, they were like, this is amazing. And then we got Hubble's telescope, and we realized they're innumerable, just like the Bible says. We'll look at more evidence next time. This may be a 2-parter. Been excellent tonight. We had a few difficulties with our phone lines, but it's just been great. Thank you for joining us as we looked at this tonight. And, please, if you have further questions, this will be up on YouTube. And I've had a wonderful time. On our beginning of our season 2, we'll be looking at different topics, how to deal with Jehovah's Witnesses, how to deal with husbands and wives, how to deal with our teenagers. We'll be looking at a lot of these things over the next few weeks. So thanks for joining us tonight, and with Let's Talk Biblically, and God bless.